Before this tale rides any further, let me ask you something. What would you do if a lone woman fled for her life across the prairie, holding a truth powerful enough to destroy an entire territory, while the only man willing to protect her stood ready to turn the plains into a battlefield? If stories like this grip you by the collar, make sure you subscribe to Western Tales so you never miss another frontier legend. Tell me where you're watching from, partner. This trail stretches farther than any map. And don't forget to like and share this video so more folks can join us around the campfire. For more powerful, dangerous, and heart-pounding Western stories, ride with us and stay tuned. The prairie stretched endlessly beneath the scorching sun, rolling like a great golden ocean across the territory. Heat shimmered above the dry grass, bending the horizon into a wavering mirage. The land looked quiet from a distance, peaceful even, but Isabella knew better. Out here, silence had sharp edges. The wrong sound carried for miles, and danger hid in the places most folks never thought to look. Her breath came out in ragged bursts as she stumbled forward, each step heavier than the last. Her torn dress snagged on the brittle weeds, and the bruises along her legs throbbed with every movement. She didn't know how long she'd been running, long enough for her throat to burn like fire, long enough for her legs to nearly give out beneath her. When the pain became too much to bear, she collapsed to her knees, hands sinking into the rough earth. Dust puffed around her like smoke. The chase had ended, but the terror had not. She pressed a shaking hand over her chest, feeling her heartbeat hammering like a desperate drum inside her ribs. She tried to swallow, but her mouth was too dry. The world tilted, blurred, and she squeezed her eyes shut, fighting to keep herself conscious. Then she heard hoofbeats. Her body tensed with pure fear, but she couldn't run anymore. All she could do was brace herself for whatever came. A shadow fell over her. Isabella? The voice was stunned, breathless, familiar. She opened her eyes to find Luis sliding off his horse with panic written across his face. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hat falling into the dust behind him. His hands hovered over her shoulders, unsure whether to touch her or afraid his touch would make her crumble. Dios santo, he whispered, his voice trembling. Who did this to you? Isabella tried to speak, but only a broken gasp came out. Her body leaned instinctively toward him, seeking the safety she had run so far to find. Luis caught her gently, supporting her as though she were made of glass. His hands were rough from ranch work, but his grip was steady, respectful. Her dress was torn nearly to ribbons from the thorns she'd crashed through. Dirt streaked her skin, and bruises bloomed along her thighs and shins where she had fallen hard in her frantic escape. Luis lifted the fabric of her skirt, careful and deliberate, checking her injuries without the slightest hint of indecency. His jaw tightened when he saw the extent of the bruising. They were close, weren't they? He asked softly. Her breath shuddered. Too close. Luis swallowed hard, forcing down the anger threatening to boil over. He'd always believed she didn't belong in a world of violence and secrets, but somehow trouble clung to her like burrs to a saddle blanket. He slid an arm behind her back and helped her sit upright. Talk to me, Isabella. Tell me what happened. She shook her head weakly. The truth felt lodged in her throat like a stone. When she finally managed to speak, her voice cracked. They saw me, she whispered. I wasn't meant to see them, but they saw me. Luis frowned. Saw what? Isabella looked over her shoulder as if the prairie grass itself had ears. The wind brushed her hair across her face, carrying the scent of dry earth and fear. The meeting, she said softly. Behind the old feed mill. I saw them counting the money, signing papers, talking about who they were going to remove next. Luis stiffened. Who? The sheriff. The ranchers who refused to sell their land. Anyone who stood in the way of their expansion. Her voice trembled. Luis. They've been running this territory in the shadows. They hire outlaws to do their dirty work. And anyone who learns too much disappears. Luis felt the world tilt under him. Stories of corruption had drifted around the territory for years. Rumors whispered in saloons, secrets traded over card tables. But no one had ever had proof. No one had survived long enough to expose it. Until now. And they know you saw? He asked. her eyes filled with tears she'd held back for too long. Yes. Luis let out a slow, shuddering breath. He reached up and wiped the dirt from her cheek with his thumb. You should have come to me sooner. I tried, she whispered. But they were watching me. They followed me. They waited until I was alone. A flicker of pure fury crossed Luis's face. He stood suddenly, scanning the horizon. The prairie wind carried no footsteps, no gunshots, but he could feel danger pressing down on them like an invisible weight. His horse snorted anxiously, picking up on the tension. They ain't far, he muttered. We need to move. He knelt again and gently lifted Isabella into his arms. She tried to protest, but the moment she shifted her weight, a wave of pain forced her silent. Luis carried her to his horse, whispering to the animal until it calmed under his touch. He settled Isabella carefully in the saddle and mounted behind her, wrapping an arm securely around her waist. You're safe now, he murmured against her ear. I won't let them touch you again. As they moved across the plains, Isabella leaned back against him, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She hadn't cried while running for her life. Not then, not when she scraped her legs on stones, not when she heard the men behind her shouting threats that turned her spine to ice. But now, in the arms of the one man she trusted, the weight of everything she'd witnessed finally broke through. Luis kept one hand on the reins and the other resting protectively against her hip. He scanned the horizon constantly, watching for riders, dust trails, or any sign that the men hunting her were near. But the prairie was deceptive. You could see miles in every direction and still miss the enemy until he was breathing down your neck. When they reached a ridge overlooking Luis's small ranch, they stopped. Below, the fields stretched like a patchwork of gold and rust. The barn cast a long shadow, and the small farmhouse was quiet, almost too quiet. Luis, she whispered suddenly, if they know I ran, they may know where you live. I thought of that, he said, which is why we're not heading to the house. He steered the horse toward a hidden ravine where he kept an old cabin, one no one in the territory knew about except him. As they descended into the cool shade, Isabella finally felt a sliver of hope. But it shattered when Luis abruptly tensed. He stopped the horse, his eyes fixed on something behind them, a dust cloud. Riders. At least 4. They're coming, he said quietly. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. We can't outrun them. Luis pulled a rifle from the saddle holster, his face hardening into the calm of a man ready to kill for someone he loved. No, he said, but we don't have to. He handed her the reins. Take the horse, ride into the ravine, don't look back. She shook her head wildly. I won't leave you. You have to. His voice was low, fierce, unshakable. You carry the truth, the kind that changes everything. If they take you, it all dies with you. Luis? He leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently to hers. You trusted me once, he whispered. Trust me now. She felt her heart splitting apart. Tears blurred her vision, but she grabbed the reins anyway. Luis squeezed her hand, then stepped back, rifle raised. I'll find you, he promised. I swear on my life. Now go. She pulled the reins and the horse bolted forward, plunging into the ravine below. Wind whipped her hair back, and rocks skidded under the hooves, but she clung to the saddle, refusing to fall. Above her on the ridge, she heard the first gunshot echo across the prairie. Then another. Then Luis's fierce battle cry as he fired back. She choked on a sob but couldn't stop. She had to survive. Behind her, the truth she carried was lighting the first sparks of a war the prairie had long been waiting for. And ahead of her lay the only chance to expose the men who ruled the territory with fear. Luis had chosen to stand and fight. Now she had to live long enough to make his sacrifice matter.